right, welcome back. In this video, we're going to understand how we can parse JSON in our Golang server, and we'll understand how we can send different types of messages from the server to the client and from the client to the server, and how we can respond differently to different kinds of messages. So let's jump in. Right, if I start my server and if my client is up, this is what our client looks like right now. Last time we added the feature of whenever we load our client, we directly send like a connection request to our server and we establish connection. Now, what I want to do is create a prompt that will ask the user to enter in a username, and I want to send that as a new user message to all of the users that are connected to our server. So we'll need to handle this differently, both on the client and the server side. So we want to first create the prompt on our client. I'm going to start by creating some state variables. First, we'll need the username state variable, and we'll need a variable that will control if we want to show the prompt. Once the user has entered the username, we don't want to show the prompt anymore. So this will control that. And we're setting this true by default because initially when the page is loaded, we want to show the username prompt to the users. And I've created this basic username prompt. It'll just be like a floating window that with just one input and one button. This is the handle set username that I've created temporarily. We will pass this to our username prompt, and we have a condition here for show prompt. So we are passing username, set username, and handle set username as our props to the username prompt component. We'll need to pass our username to the chat window. So along with that, we will also need to have the username in our messages itself. The way we are handling our messages right now is that these are just plain strings. And instead of that, we will need to have some sort of a structure like this where we will have a username and we will have the message. In order to do this, I'm going to create a new TypeScript type. And instead of just having messages as strings, we're going to create that type every single time, which will have the structure that I just showed. And I'm going to have this renderable message TypeScript type, which we will render on our client end. Our state variable will no longer be an array of strings. It will be an array of renderable messages. So that's one change. And we'll need to change this handle set messages as well. In here, I'm creating a new message of the same format as the one that we described, which will just have the message string coming in, and the user will be the username state variable. Once we have that, we now have access to all of the messages along with the user who sent that message and the contents of the message. And we have the username, which is the current user. So I've added a bunch of conditional rendering here, mainly for the styles, and I'm rendering the username as well now. So if we look at the output and if we enter a message, we'll see the message coming in. Of course, this isn't really being sent to the server. We will need to handle that. So in here, along with the handle send message, if I add a socket.send with a stringified message that we have created, then this should get sent to our server. And we can add like a print statement in our Golang server and see if we're receiving it. We see our message show up here, the message that we sent and the user who sent it. This doesn't really make sense right now. We want to send a new user message whenever the user enters their username and they like submit that username. That's when we want to add that username to this list of users. So right now we do know that we need two kinds of messages. We need the broadcast message and the new user message, and they will both have a similar kind of a format with the username and the content. But in the case of a new user, we will only have the username. We won't have the message contents. And of course, we will need a message type in both of these. So I've created a base message type, and both of these like types are extending from that base message. So they're kind of inheriting from the traits that we've defined here for the base message. So both of these will have like a message type. So let's just start with the new user type message. I'm just going to import that real quick. And we're going to need to handle all of this logic within the handle set username function. So we're setting the username. We're like not displaying the prompt anymore. After this, we're having a new user message here, which is the type of the new user message. and we're having the message type as new user. This is how we will distinguish all of the different message types that we are sending from our client to our server. And this will be the main content that we are sending to our server. And then we just do a socket.send with a stringified message. If we go back and try to send a new message, we have entered a username and we should see that here. So message type new user and the username that we entered. Now we want to parse this JSON on our Golang server and before creating our user that is. And using this username, we want to create the new user. So Golang has a pretty cool way of parsing JSON. It has a standard library that supports this. So we're just going to import the encoding JSON library. This is what will help us parse the JSON, which is stringified on the client's end. Now I'm doing something similar to what I did on the client end. I'm creating a new message type, which is a string, and creating the different message types that we expect to receive from the client. So this would be the new user type, in which case the message type would be new user. And in the broadcast message type, it would just be a broadcast message. And we're creating a struct for each of these message types. So I've created a base message and I'm having separate structs for the broadcast message and the new user message, both of them having a base message type field in them, which would just give the message type trait to both of these. Right now, we're expecting to parse this type when we receive a new user type message. Once we have a socket connection established, once we have received a message successfully, we want to now parse the message. And then we will probably have like a switch case, which will handle each of these message types separately. So over here, we'll need to parse the message that we have received, and we're storing that message in this message variable. So I've created a parsed message variable, and in here, the way we parse a message is to do JSON unmarshal, which will convert the string into the JSON. So in the first step, we will just expect to have the message type with us. If there is an error, then we just print the error and we remove the user out of our global users. And if that's not the case, then we create a switch case with the parse message dot message type. And in here, we will have a case for new user type. So the other case is to have a broadcast message type. And the first one, we want to handle it differently. We don't want to do this. We don't want to have a faker dot fake username and any of this. We want to parse this message and extract the username and store that as the new user's name. So we're going to remove this line from here, which means that we won't have to remove the user from here either. So just like we parsed our message earlier with the base message, we'll also parse our message for the new user message. Earlier, we didn't know which kind of message it was when we were parsing it for the base message. Now we do know that it's a new user message, so we can parse it for this. So the add user logic that we got rid of earlier, we can add this after we have parsed our message. And instead of passing like a fake username, we now pass in the username that we received from the user. Let's try testing this out. Okay, so we do see the username that we entered is what we are setting. Now we want to broadcast this message to all of the users that are connected to our chat server. So inside our broadcast function, we'll need to accept interfaces from now on because we'll be passing different types of messages here. In here, we're going to define a message and an error. And over the message.type, we're going to have a switch case, which will just check if it's like a new user message or like a broadcast message. If it's either of these, then we will marshal the message that we're receiving. But the default case would just be to set the error. And if there is an error, then we just panic, we just end the program there. All right, so from this new logic that we've added, we're essentially just converting the JSON that we receive into a string format, and we're just broadcasting it. That's pretty much what we're doing here. So to test this out, we'll need to add some sort of a console log to our client side. Okay, so let's test this out. Yep, we do see message received in our client. Now we need to pass this message and render it. So we need to first parse the message that we receive, and we expect the message to be a server message, and which we've defined as either the broadcast message or the new user message. And then we add our switch case for message.message type. So in both of the cases, we'll need to use our messages state and set messages because we want to render this at the end of the day. So the message in this case would just be a new user has joined the chat and the user would be server. And I've added some logic here which handles server in a different way. So the text would be center aligned. That's pretty much it. Let's have two users connect to our server. So first we'll have one user. All right, so we see that that user has joined on this page, and we also see it on the other users page. Now we want to handle sending messages from one of the users. So if I send the message right now, we don't see much on other users. So we want to send this type of a message to the server, and on the server end, we want to handle this and broadcast it back to all of the connections that we have to our server. We need to add that logic to handle send message function. This is triggered whenever a user enters a message here and let's sends it. Now I'm creating a new message. This will be of type broadcast message, and we stringify this and send this to the server. If we look at our server, we see that we haven't handled the broadcast type, and it will pretty much be similar to what we are doing here. We will parse the message first, and this will be a broadcast message type. Let's just see if we're seeing a console log. All right, so we see that when I sent a message from our input here, we see a broadcast message type. So now we want to render this for the users. So in our on message use effect, we are not handling the broadcast message type. So we first check if content is present in the message. If it is, then we set the message and the user would be message.username. All right, so here's the bug that we've discovered. We're seeing two messages, and this is happening because we're sending the message to the server is broadcasting the message to all of the users, and we are among those users. So there are two solutions here. One would be to either handle this on the server end, or the other would be to handle this on the client end. The issue that we are having on the client end is that whenever we handle send message, we are also setting the message. If we don't do this, then it should still work. We see that we don't, even though we received a new message, we just see one entry here because what's rendered here is what's coming from the server. We're receiving something from the server, and that's what we've rendered here. And we should see those rendered in other users as well. So let's create a new user, let's send a message, and we see that message rendered on the other user. Cool. So our broadcast functionality is working now. Our new user functionality is working now. We learned how to parse JSON on the Golang chat server and how we can handle different message types in our chat application. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something from it. If you liked it, leave a like, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.